So today we are going to be looking at section 10 in the Principles of Business CSEC syllabus, and we are going to be looking at objective number 8. Explain the national income and its variations: gross national product, gross domestic product, per capita income. So we are going to go through these three concepts, and we are going to compare and show the difference between GDP, which is gross domestic product, GDP, and GNP, gross national product. So we're going to show you the difference between these two right here. And then we're also going to explain per capita income, or PI. And then we're going to explain how each of these concepts affect growth and development and impact the standard of living and the quality of life. Okay, so this is what we're going to look at today. So let's just jump right in and get started. So this tend to be the extent to which you're going to have accounting in POB. A while back, before the syllabus was revamped or revised, we had a lot more accounting in POB. But they decided that maybe students who do in POB don't necessarily do accounts, so they strip out some of it. So this is the extent to which accounts would come into play in POB. This is a national accounting right here. We're talking about GDP and GNP and those things. So let's just get started. GDP and GNP. GDP and GNP. What is GDP? What is GNP? GDP stands for gross domestic product. GDP measures output of goods and services. GNP stands for gross national product. To calculate GNP from GDP, you deduct profits sent home by overseas investors and you add income earned from your country's investments abroad. So let's just break down all of these right now. GDP. Now, a working definition for GDP would be the monetary value of all goods goods and services that were created within the borders of a country in a given period of time, normally a year. They normally measure GDP for the year. So GDP is the monetary value. They put a dollar value on all the goods and services that were produced within an economy, within a country, over a period of time, usually 1 year. That's GDP, gross domestic product. So the reason why domestic here is highlighted is because it only talks about everything that was produced, goods and services produced within the borders of the country. No matter who produces it, once it was produced within the borders of the country, it goes toward that country's GDP. So, for example, if Trinidad, Jamaica, St. Kitts, Nevis, Antigua, whatever country, as long as something was produced within the borders of that country, then that would go towards that country's GDP. So anything created within the 2,000 something square miles of Jamaica, that goes towards Jamaica's GDP. All right. So that's it right there. GDP, gross domestic product. Now GNP, on the other hand, it stands for gross national product, and national here refers to all the factors of production that are owned by a national of a given country. So GNP would be the monetary value of all goods and services created by factors of production owned by nationals of a said country. So Trinidad, GNP would include all the goods and services, the monetary value of all the goods and services produced that are owned, where the factor of productions are owned by a Trinidadian. So it doesn't matter if it was produced within the borders of the country, it's once it was produced by a factor of production owned by a national of the country. So that's why they say to calculate GNP from GDP, what you do, you deduct the profit sent home by overseas investors. So let's say somebody lives in Jamaica and they operate in a business in Jamaica, but that person is not Jamaican, they are American. So the factors of production are owned by an American. Now, the profits from that production unit would be deducted from Jamaica's GDP. So the profits from that production unit, once it is not owned by a national, if it's owned by a foreigner, then the profits from that is deducted from Jamaica's GDP. But then the units, the factor of production owned by nationals who are abroad is added to the GDP of Jamaica, and that's how we get the GNP. So the GNP, you deduct the profits that were sent home by overseas investors, and then you add the income earned by expats overseas earning money, their production unit earning money, goods and services. So that money, those profits are added to the GDP of that country, and the end result is what you call GNP. So GDP is the monetary value of all goods created within the borders of a country, goods or service within the borders of a country, whereas GNP is the monetary value of all goods created by factors of production owned by nationals of that country. So that's the key difference there. The GDP is just within the borders of the country. GNP is ownership. It's all about ownership. Once a national of that country owns that production unit, then whatever receipts are added to the GDP of that country. So that's the key difference between GDP and GNP. One is just domestic, and one is the factor of production of that country. Then everything is added to that, and what it is not is deducted, and the end result is the GNP. So that's the difference between GDP and GNP. Now, these are other indicators, other measures of national income right here. You have NI, which is national income, and NI can be interchanged for GDP. So when you see GDP or national income, they tend to be one and the same, especially if you're an econ major. If you're in an economics class, the GDP and the NI, the national income, and the gross domestic product tend to be interchangeable. They tend to be the same. So when you see NI, national income, or GDP, they tend to be interchangeable. So don't get confused. They are the same. So national income, NI stands for national income. Now, to calculate national income, deduct capital consumption from GNP. Now, what is, you would have heard this word before, per capita. Per capita. What does per capita mean? So if you hear somebody talking about GDP per capita, what does that mean? Now, what that means is that per capita always refers to dividing a number by the population of a country. Okay, for example, the GDP, whatever the GDP of Jamaica is, that's going to be divided by the almost 3 million people that live in Jamaica, the 2.7, 2.8 million that live in Jamaica. That's going to be divided by how much ever the GDP is, and you get the gross domestic product per capita. So anything per capita means divided by the population. So if you hear murders per capita, that's how much murder happened in a country divided by the population of that country. So per capita means divided by the population. So as you can see the formula here for GDP per capita, you have total GDP. So let's say GDP is 100, and you have a population of 50. Then you're going to put 100 divided by 50, then you get what? 2. So per capita would GDP per capita would be 2. So that's the formula right here. Total GDP, total gross domestic product, divided by the population. So that's how we get GDP per capita. Per capita approximately measures the standard of living. How? Why? Now, they say that you can measure the standard of living by using per capita. I think if you go through, some of the stats, you'll see certain countries, even if you check Wikipedia, you'll see certain countries are rated by their per capita, and that tends to measure the standard of living. All right, let me check it out. So if you check out this here and on Wikipedia, this is the list of countries, and they are ranking them based on GDP per capita. So you have different ranking agencies. You have the CIA in America, you have the World Bank, and you have the International Monetary Fund, or the IMF. So they're ranking countries based on their GDP per capita. So what they're saying is that the amount of money that the country generated over the year, that is divided by the population. So the GDP divided by the population. And as you can see here, rich countries, rich oil countries like Qatar and them, these have a very high GDP per capita. So what they're saying here is that every individual earns an average of $130 $100,000 in Qatar. Let's go down to the Caribbean. Let's go down to the first Caribbean country. Okay, so we have the island here of you have Trinidad and Tobago. So they are saying that in all of the countries in the world, Trinidad and Tobago is ranked number 41 according to IMF in GDP per capita. You have Bahamas just above here, which is number 40. So what they're saying is that Trinidad is every person in Trinidad earns an average of $32,252. That's what they're saying, From man, woman, and child earn an average of $32,254. Now we all know that might not be true because kids not working, but that is what. But they still use GDP per capita as a loose ranking for standard of living. So they are saying that each person earns this, so therefore the standard of living might be a little high. That's what they're saying. So that's why they rank standard of living. They can rank standard of living and compare countries across the world. Now there's a problem with this ranking because, as you can see, this does not show how the money is distributed. Because, for example, they have here Trinidad and Tobago again, rank 41, $32,254 per person. Now, the reality is you might have upper class who earning majority of the money and a lower class who's not really making much money. So even though they can use it just as a loose measure of standard of living, it doesn't really paint the true picture. So that's one of the problems with using this as a measure of standard of living, the GDP per capita. It can be used, but it still have its drawbacks. Okay, so that's what GDP per capita is, and that's how it is used in national accounting. So that's GDP per capita. That's GDP and GNP in a nutshell. So let's look at economic growth versus economic development. Okay, we're gonna look at economic growth and economic development. So economic growth. Most governments promote economic growth. That's true because you want your country to advance. So most governments promote GDP growth because if your country earns more money, then you can lead to development in the country. So what is economic growth though? Now economic growth is just simply a change in the GDP. So if one year a country earns $1 trillion in GDP and the next year they own 1 trillion.2, that's economic growth because the GDP changed. Even if they earn 900 billion, for a year, they're gonna say that's economic growth, but it's negative growth. That's a negative growth. So if GDP falls from one year to the next, that's negative growth. If it increases, that's positive growth. But they still call it economic growth either way. So most governments promote GDP growth. Growth rates vary from country to country, from year to year. So something may be up, something may be down, depending on the year. GDP growth improves the standard of living. GDP growth may improve quality of life. You hear what they say? May. And we will look at that later, why they put may there. 4% annual growth brings a cumulative growth of close to 120% after 20 years. So this is economic growth. So as I explained before, it can either be negative, positive, I could say the same, stagnant, but it's still called economic growth. So once there's a change in GDP, then that's what you call economic growth. So like they say, GDP growth improves the standard of living. So here what they're saying here. If GDP goes up and you're still dividing it by the population, then of course they are saying people are earning more money, people have more money in their pocket. So that's why they say it's an indicator for an increased standard of living. And like I said before, it's not a good measure because you don't know how the money is distributed. You might be all at the top getting all the money, the 1%, and then everybody else getting, crumbs. GDP growth may improve quality of life. And we're going to look at that right now, why they say may. So, reasons for GDP growth. So, what can cause the GDP in a country to grow? There are a number of factors, but let's look at these here, right here. 2, 4, 5 factors here. There are a number of factors, but let's look at these 5 here. 1, improving technology. 2, increased productivity. 3, improved communications. 4, better organization. And 5, new discoveries of natural resources such as oil or gold. And we know just recently Guyana discovered a lot of oil. So Guyana GDP might just be skyrocketing just now. So right there you see an example of this happening in real life. The GDP for Guyana might be going up in years to come because of the discovery of oil. So that's a good point right there. Improving technology. So what they're saying here is that if technology improves, then that means that the country can actually produce more, and therefore the GDP should grow. Because we're saying that if you had a citizen, the population used to work with their hands, our small tools, our obsolete tools, then when they could only produce, let me say, let's say 10,000, 10 tons. Now with improved technology, you get new machine, more improved equipment. All of a sudden, the same population can create tons more. So that's how improving technology can help it with GDP growth, because it actually enhances. It helps to enhance productivity. So you see here, increased productivity. Productivity measures the output, per unit. So technology can help to enhance this productivity. What else can enhance productivity? Education. If somebody becomes more educated in the way of doing a certain thing, then they become more productive, and as such, they can produce more. And if this happens on a larger scale, then everybody in the country going to output more, thus leading to an increase in the GDP of that country. Okay, so these others are pretty much self-explanatory. Better organization. You have less wastage, more efficiency, so that can lead to GDP growth. All right, so that's how these factors can improve GDP growth. Again, a change in the GDP of that country. Now, GDP growth may be slowed by, of course, it can be slowed. In the Caribbean, we are susceptible to this right here, you know, disasters. So one year you might be, your economy is based on tourism or agriculture. One year you're outputting a lot. Next year a drought, your output gone down. Just the other day, Dominica was hit hard by a hurricane, and of course, Dominica, relies heavily on agriculture. And so, if no crops are there to harvest, then of course your output, your GDP, would fall. You know, when there's a downturn in the economy in America or Europe or China, and tourists stop coming to the Caribbean, GDP tends to fall because there's nobody coming, so there's nothing being produced much to satisfy the demand. So therefore, that would cause GDP to fall. Okay, so when tourism drop, GDP tend to fall. And of course, monetary policies which reduce demand, such as increased interest rate. So let's break down this. I know this might be a new concept to some of y'all who don't do economics. So what is monetary policy? Monetary policy is the policies used by a government or a central bank to control the money supply, okay, to control the money within the economy. So it's all their rules and regulations that they use to control the money within a society, within an economy. That's the job of the central banks. Jamaica have the central bank, the OECs have the central bank, Guyana have the central bank, the Trinidad have their own central bank. So that bank controls the money within the economy. So they might very well say, okay, let's increase the interest rate for borrowing. So all of a sudden, you only have to pay back the bank, let's say 5% when you borrow some money. Now you have to pay back 10%. What does that do to you as a person? You go and borrow less because you don't want to have to pay back so much more money. So as such, if you borrow less, that means you don't have as much money to spend. So therefore, demand for products will fall, and therefore output will fall. Because you're not going to produce if nobody's asking for it. So that's how monetary policies affect the GDP growth. Okay. So this is what I was talking about when I said that GDP may lead to development. It leads to growth because it's economic growth, it changes. But development, now growth and development are two different concepts. How? Let's explain these two concepts. What is growth? What is development? Growth, as I said before, is a quantitative change. So a figure has changed. So GDP might have been, like I said, a trillion this year, and then is a trillion point five next year. So that's a quantitative. You can measure this change. You can actually put a dollar value to this change. So that's what we call growth, GDP growth. When there's a change in GDP, that's growth. It can either be negative or it can be positive. So when the economy expands, you have growth. You have a change in the GDP. It increases, you have growth. It can be measured. It's quantitative. Quantitative means quantity. Quantity. There can be a figure put to it. So that's what GDP is. It's a quantitative change. GDP growth is a quantitative change in GDP. Whereas development, on the other hand, development is a qualitative change. What does that mean? You cannot really put a figure on that change. It's quality of life. It's a qualitative change. You don't really know how to measure it. You don't really know how to put a dollar value on it. For example, development. You might have an increase in money in GDP. What do you do with the money? You improve educational facilities. You improve healthcare. All those would add to development in the country. Improve life expectancy, improve, you know, improve education, improve health, improve welfare. That's development. When there's a qualitative change in the economy, right? In the nature of the economy, meaning people are living longer, people are happier, you have more personal freedom because you have development. Sustainable growth and development requires social and environmental awareness. Angola chose to stress GDP growth to deal with social and environmental problems. So, development and growth are two different things. But there's always this question: can there be growth without development? Or can development occur without growth? What is the answer to that? Hmm? Now, the answer is there can be growth with no development, but development requires growth. Because I tell you why. Growth means GDP has changed, the output that the country provides has increased. But who is to say that the money is going to go to something positive? The government might take the taxpayers' money and the output and do something foolish with the money. So therefore, there's no development. They might not invest in education. They might not invest in health. They might not invest in anything that improves the life of the citizens. So then there will be no development. There's growth, yes, but there'll be no development. But to have development, you need that money to spend. So you need growth. You need positive growth in order to get development. Because how are you going to build a new hospital if you don't have money? How are you going to build a new school if you don't have money? How are you going to pave the roads? How are you going to improve the infrastructure of the country without money? So that's why you need growth for development to take place. So, some point to remember, as I've been saying before, real growth occurs only when GDP increases faster than inflation. Now, we're not going to go too deep into this stuff, the economics. All right. Stagnation is when the economy stays the same. Negative growth, as we said before, is when the GDP reduces or contracts. Okay, so that's GDP and GNP in a nutshell. And then we also looked at growth. So, let's see if we can tick off some of the points on the syllabus and to enhance all of this further. So let's go. So we looked at GDP, which is gross domestic product. We looked at GNP, gross national product. We looked at per capita income, and we also looked at national income. Okay, so let me just give you the definitions quickly one more time. National income is the same as national gross domestic product, GNP. Sorry, GDP is the same. So national income is the same as GDP. That's the monetary value of all goods and services produced within the borders of a country over a specific period of time, usually 1 year. That's GDP, that's national income. GNP, on the other hand, is the monetary value of all goods and services produced by factors of production owned by nationals of that country. So what does this mean? Is that to find G to find GNP, you have to minus the profits that belongs to a foreign entity, and then you add the profits that came in from overseas from nationals of that country who are working overseas. So yes, those are the definitions we're working with for these three concepts. Explain how each of these concepts affect growth and development and impact standard of living and quality of life. We went through that already. We said that growth is when GDP changes. When it increases, you have positive growth. When it decreases, you have negative growth. When it stays the same, it contracts. So growth is always about the change in GDP. And growth tends to be, uh, you can measure growth. You can put a value on growth. Whereas development, you cannot really put a dollar figure on development. It's just measuring the change in, the nature of the economy, the quality of the economy, better education, better health, better infrastructure, that kind of thing. All that leads to development. And we said that GDP per capita can be used to measure standard of living, but it's not a good measure because it does not show how the money is distributed within the economy. It just shows that, okay, GDP per capita means that the GDP is divided by the population of that country. And we know it doesn't really tell a true picture. Quality of life, of course, we said that development can lead to and improve in the quality of life of a nation, of a country. So those concepts are pretty much covered. So next time we are going to cover the, you know what, let's cover it right now. The role of education in economic development and growth. So let's look at how education can lead to an economic growth and development. This one is pretty much self-explanatory. If you have a well-educated population, then that means that that population should be able to produce at a more efficient level because they are more knowledgeable. So the workforce should be more knowledgeable, should be more productive. And as such, that should lead to an increase in output of that country. So that can lead to economic growth. And it can also lead to development because the same way, if you have improved doctors, you have well-trained doctors, well-trained lawyers, well-trained teachers, well-trained nurses, then that would bolster both the health sector, that would bolster the education sector. If you have engineers coming in from university, then that should bolster, your civil area, your buildings, your infrastructure. So all that would lead to development within that country, and all that would lead to growth in that country. So education is a key driving force in both growth and development. If you have a country where the citizens are uneducated, then that country would not have, improved economic growth, and they would not have development. You'll have a poor, poverty-stricken country. Okay, university grads tend to earn more money than high school grads and dropouts. So that's how education can lead to economic growth and development, because an improved workforce can help to increase output in a number of ways through efficiency, productivity, through know-how, knowledge, that kind of thing. So that is how they lead to growth and development. Okay, so that's, we just knocked off basically section, objective 8 and 9 from section 10 in the 60 syllabus. And next time we're going to knock off section 10. Well, no, we're not going to touch section 10 because I think it explained itself. Everybody know why we trade. Okay, and it's outlined here in the syllabus why we trade. So you don't have to go and understand any concepts. It's right there in black and white why countries trade, right here, A, B, C, D. So if you want to, you can just pause the video and just quickly take the notes from the syllabus, unless you have the syllabus already. So you can pause the video and write down the answers for number 10. So number 10 is covered because it's right here in the syllabus. So the next one we are going to look at would be, let's see. We are going to look at section 13. Okay, identify major economic problems in the Caribbean. That one we are going to outline. We are going to look at 13 and 14 in the next video. So again, like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you can know when new videos are uploaded. So yes, that's it for now for this video. Thanks for watching.